Welcome, Anay, to my podcast. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with me here. Firstly, congratulations for getting the admit for HBS. I know, like, from your face, I can tell how happy you are about the whole entire
Yeah.
process and how it worked out for you. Just wanted to understand, man, like, now you have the admit and, like, couple of months to go for the business school to start. So, what are you up to right now? What are you thinking? How are you planning to utilize the next few months?
Got it. Well, first, thanks for having me here. Yeah, the entire celebration also was fun, primarily not just from a getting in perspective, but also from seeing the other people who have helped me along the process celebrate it
Yeah.
as well. I think that was quite rewarding in some sense. Uh, yeah, I think once that happened, then it really starts sinking in that you've gotten in, you've been accepted, and then the immediate next question is, okay, now what do I want to do over the next 3 4 months? Right? I think
Yeah.
if I had an R1 admit, I probably would have had more time to really think this through and explore options. Unfortunately, I don't, but I have a fair sense of what I want to do after the program. And essentially, what I want to do over the next few months is like a stepping stone towards that. So, have initiated a few conversations for not necessarily roles specifically, but just conversations to understand different industries that I would like to work in. So, for example, PE, VC,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Just things like that. Speaking to people who I would say would probably give good life advice, which I think right now is more critical than anything else. When you say, "Oh, you're still 27 and you've gotten in with 5 years of work experience," what the hell is 5 years
Yeah.
of work experience, dude? It's nothing. So speaking to
Yeah.
people who are like 50, 55, getting their thoughts on what I should do, right? What industry they're in, what their career looks like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
those kinds of conversations, yeah, is what I'm getting forward to at this point. Yeah, not much in terms of actually meeting other admits at this point. I think there are a few dinners that are planned, which are likely to go for. But
Nice.
yeah, I think first interaction with bulk of the class would most likely be in orientation week itself in August.
So you must be very excited about that. I'm sure. But like, other thing I wanted to understand, yeah, like this is something I ask upfront because I want to understand
Yeah,
the guest I'm getting just to understand how
yeah.
you think about things. So, what matters to you in life the most at this point in life, and why is it that?
Uh, Interestingly, I think it's the Stanford interview prompt also. I think that was what matters most to you and why.
Yeah,
Uh, and yeah, I mean, see, I think from a perspective, it changes every few years, right? Like last
yeah,
year,
yeah.
it was first acing the GMAT because I knew I had to do that, and that's the only way I would get a foot in to even apply. Right. A couple of years ago, before that, it was sort of making a move from the company I was at to another company in terms of what
Right.
I essentially wanted to do. Year before that, it was primarily fitness focused. Right. So I think while the actual definition may change depending on the context I'm in life. I think what matters most to me is has always just been some element of pushing myself, right? Not really quitting, and yeah, just keep going at it because I'm sure, like I know I'm not like the smartest guy out there, whatever, but I can definitely be the guy who doesn't stop trying, and then figures out the process to actually get it. And I think that's really what helped me in the entire and this is something that I realized hindsight while
Yeah.
actually writing the essays. Um, it's not even something that I would have come up with immediately. This was like something that came up from a colleague of mine at Mahindra who I was speaking to, and he's like, this is something about you that we have seen over the last few years. Right? Why aren't you writing about this? And I'm like, I actually didn't even think about that in the first place. And I think that's another thing I end up realizing, right? You sort of get the best advice, right? Even in the application process, chances are whatever you write first initially yourself is just unusable garbage.
Yeah.
And until you show it to somebody who actually knows
Yeah.
you, and you get that outsider's perspective, that's when really like the things start clicking in.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. So like if you basically have to like say, so you would say that for you at this point in your life it's just about bettering yourself professionally and personally at this point in all
Yeah, I would say
respects.
that's true. That's true. That's been true for quite some time, I think.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that's like the theme that's going to continue, but how it manifests itself is still to be seen, right? Like how much of it goes towards professional versus personal ambitions.
Yeah,
Things like
yeah.
that. I think that depends entirely on the scenario and context, obviously, at that point.
You you touched upon some of your advice from your colleagues at your previous
Yeah.
firms in Pharmeasy and Mahindra. I want to
Yeah.
know what your background is. Can you, for the benefit of the viewers,
Uh,
can you tell me
yeah.
what what kind of roles have you assumed at Mahindra first, your
Sure.
first few years, and then followed by Pharmeasy? How that role even evolved as you progressed over the years, and how has it like equipped you with those skill sets which helps you today as an operator in the business world?
Okay, sure. I mean, let's if you have to start right from the beginning, just professionally, I was graduating Xavier's and I did a BSc in information technology from there in about 2018.
Yeah.
Right, Xavier's is known to be primarily an arts and yeah, I mean mostly an arts and science college, not really engineering.
Bombay Stop Liberal Arts College.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone knows about it.
So yeah, so I mean, I would say I don't think I really knew anyone else who was doing a BSc IT initially. Everyone else is either engineering in another college entirely, or all my actual school friends from Cathedral who ended up going to
Yeah.
Xavier's were all doing a BA or a BSc in life sciences or one of those more traditional sciences, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, why I ended up doing a BSc IT also was just basically because I enjoyed number crunching and
Yeah.
I did a bit of computers, physics, and accounts, and I was like, this seems like a kind of degree that provides you those fundamental skills to do anything in the future in terms of programming, in terms of some level of hardware engineering, some level of
Yeah.
mathematics
Yeah.
or economics, and also that's largely what I was interested in, and those were also the roles I was looking for after I graduated from Xavier's, right? So I was looking primarily for um, parts in data analytics, data science, and machine learning. Um, Obviously, none of these recruiters ever came to campus. Everyone in
Yeah.
Xavier's was sitting for placements at McKinsey, Deloitte, BCG, and at that point, I had no idea what these companies were. Right? If somebody told me, "Oh, I'm staying for
Yeah.
McKinsey," I'm like, "Cool, man, go for it." I have no idea what that is. So I was largely oblivious to that in the beginning. Um, then yeah, then I mean, so I had to go down this entire um, job search through my own network.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I approached people for roles in data analytics, data science, at various companies. Spoke to my dad also, so my dad and granddad both had worked at Mahindra, and they suggested, approaching Mahindra to um, ask what they were doing in the data field essentially. And then
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
went to one of my dad's ex-colleagues who's still at Mahindra Finance specifically, spoke to him, and he mentioned that there was um, a gentleman named Rohit Pandarkar who was setting up a data science team within the group strategy office. So they mentioned some of the projects that they were working in, credit scoring, business intelligence, stuff like that, right? And how they were really using it to solve business problems, but specifically like within strategy. So this was something that I was definitely interested in, and I went and had that conversation. That's how I ended up in the first job I had. Was at the group strategy office at Mahindra for about 3 years. Right, so it's essentially doing strategy projects, but primarily using data analytics, data science, and machine learning. So it was things like
Hmm.
building a credit scoring model for a vertical in Mahindra Finance. It was identifying why market share was changing, um, Yeah, I mean, sort of like your quintessential strategy type of role, but I would say less recommendations and more number crunching from my end in that sense. Um,
Hmm.
so that was
Hmm.
about 3 years. This would have been till like 2021.
Three
I want to say
years.
20,
So so
2020.
so
Yeah.
so basically, this was like this was a like a technical role where you had to use like your analytical skills to actually like make certain decisions and
Yeah.
certain
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And
recommendations
I
based
mean,
on that. Understood.
exactly.
Understood.
So the team itself, at least, well, the data science team, firstly, and then secondly, um, the GSO was essentially broken down into four main verticals at that point, which were strategy, synergy, digital, data science. So
Hmm.
two of
Hmm.
them, which were like digital and data science, were very new at that point, up and coming type of um, roles that were there. So these tended to be younger folks within the team, and then obviously the ones who were doing most of the hands-on development stuff, right? The actual number crunching were far younger, and I was probably the youngest out of that team of
Hmm. Hmm.
50 odd
Hmm.
people, right? And the rest of the GSO was essentially all um, MBA grads, either done MBB or investment banking or in manufacturing from one of the big Indian conglomerates previously. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
using my technical skills that I'd learned at Xavier's, but essentially learning over those 3 years from these people around me in that sense.
Interesting. So you're working with folks who had like a lot more work ethics than you, coming
Oh yeah, yeah,
from
for sure.
top tier schools and
I
like
think
interesting.
apart from me, most of them would have been maybe early 30s, probably starting early 30s. This would be the people who were my direct managers, and then obviously as
Yeah.
you go
Yeah.
further,
Yeah.
that age gap continues. Yeah,
Wait, so you were there for like 3 years, and then what happened? Like, what was that pivotal inflection point where you're like, okay, I want to
yeah.
like
Well,
move out,
it's
not work with this team, probably like explore something else.
yeah. Well, I think there were quite a few reasons actually. I think firstly, Mahindra didn't have a um, B2C tech first company in the sense that all the analytics that we were doing were predominantly you would say either B2B companies or B2C through retail, like physical retail.
Hmm.
So you know when you go to buy a
Hmm.
car, you don't buy it on an app, you don't buy it on the website, you buy it from a dealership, right? And
Yeah.
these were sort of avenues that did not really have a lot of data available or the best kind of data available, right? And I think one is, given that I was from a data background, I wanted to learn
Yeah.
about specifically e-commerce, right? So that was Amazon, Google, etc., and obviously work at a much smaller firm. So the age gap here um, would have definitely played a role in terms of career progression, etc. Right? So I think to get that experience of complete ownership um, and complete ownership of projects and also career growth. I thought working at a smaller firm also makes sense.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
those are two reasons I was looking for something outside the group. And then I moved to Pharmeasy. If I just answer specifically why Pharmeasy, well, at that point I had a couple of offers from other startups in the country, but Pharmeasy, two reasons. One, during the pandemic rather, Pharmeasy's valuation had shot to about 5.5 billion, right? It was
Wow.
pretty much like untouchable at that point. They had 50% of the pharmacy market share. They were killing it. They were doing
Wow.
phenomenal things, and they were also in the right space, right? I mean, healthcare, technology, but also at the specific point of time where it mattered the most, right? Like people needed medicines every day. If they weren't able to get it from if they weren't able to step out to get it from a local pharmacist, Pharmeasy would deliver it.
Yeah.
Right, Pharmeasy would send a phlebotomist to your house to actually take your sample and do an RT-PCR test, right? So they were providing what were, in my mind and my opinion, genuinely required services at that point of time also. Um, so I
Hmm.
think, yeah, my
Hmm.
choice came down to Pharmeasy for those reasons. Um, I also knew
So
one of the
join,
people.
so join pharmacy in 2021, right? after
Yeah,
3 years.
November 2021. Yeah.
So 2021, 2024. So what did you get hired for, and how did your role really evolve in that organization over the next 3 years leading up to B
I,
school?
yeah, I don't think Pharmeasy's 2-year journey can really be encapsulated in in any kind of small discussion. To be honest, it's been phenomenal. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, um, well, I joined as a senior business analyst for the diagnostics business. So, for context, Pharmeasy had borrowed money from Goldman Sachs to acquire Thyrocare. When it acquired 66% of Thyrocare, it actually made, I think it was the first startup ever in India to acquire majority stake in a listed company. And this was just before I joined, right? So I mean, again, like I was saying, Pharmacy was literally all over the news at that point. Those ads were everywhere. I think everyone knew that jingle of the Kharach Natyam one and Take It Easy, Pharmacy. Like the brand recall, etc., was just phenomenal. And
Yeah.
yeah, I got hired in the diagnostics sector, the diagnostics vertical as a business analyst, and
Yeah.
role there was primarily just handling the integration of Thyrocare with Pharmeasy post the acquisition. So that was the first year, and the second year, I wanted to move away from data analytics per se, because when I really started reflecting, and I asked myself, what do I really want to do? What do my managers do? What do their managers do? Right, I realized that I don't necessarily want to be just a data kind of guy. I want that business side of it, and that's what I really want to develop. And that's why I asked them if they had um, business specific roles open within Pharmacy, right? And that's
Right.
when they sort of promoted me diagonally into the business team, where I was managing the B2C P&L for the diagnostics business itself. So I had that first year of context to really understand what the business does, what margins, etc. And then second year, take it from uh, yeah, it was like negative 30% EBITDA margins to break even, and then yeah, now about 10 to 13%
Wow.
positive. So, yeah.
Pretty cool, man. Pretty cool. So then the second role, which was at Pharmacy, was the one where you used all your technical skills and also gained operating experience in terms of how business is run, and and you just told me how you turned around the EBITDA margins. That's pretty cool,
Yeah.
man. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So now you've told me about your entire journey, your professional experience leading up to Harvard Business School. So how does that tie in? How do you capture your unique journey in the application process for Harvard Business School? How can you like give us some insights into how do you go about the application process?
Got it. Well, the application process is not particularly hard. I think the part where I got stuck the most versus, and I think not versus, but in fact, where most people would most likely get stuck the most also is the question you rightly asked, right? Like, how do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah.
And I think that's in hindsight also the to me biggest factor I think that plays into why somebody would get in versus somebody not getting in. And the reason I say this is that um, from a business school perspective, this is just my opinion. I don't think there's any way of verifying this.
Yeah.
Right, the class is structured to have as many diverse and differing opinions as possible, so that especially in HBS, right, because they have the case method, you want to have people who chime in from different perspectives on a specific given topic, right? So in a class of 90, you want 90 different perspectives if possible, and not the same kind of background, etc., right? So that being said, there are definitely feeders into business school like your MBB, etc., but you have to be really at um, the top of your league in those cases, right? So again, my entire application process first started out with me trying to sort of put myself against these folks, because I'm like, if I'm an Indian male, and I didn't know whether at that point BSc IT would be considered engineering, non-engineering. right? So I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
Indian male engineer, what the hell do I really show now in this case? And and I think through the process, um, speaking to people, showing them what my output was, and then getting their sense of it, was the real factor that actually ended up making the biggest difference, right? So, for example, if I wrote the first draft of the essay and then I showed it to a colleague at Mahindra, and he's like, "Listen, this is not who you are, right? Like, you are not a consultant. Like, even though you came from the GSO, you are not essentially a consultant. You were primarily a Uh, data science, data analytics, machine learning guy, right? That's where you really stand out. That's the value that you bring. So highlight that aspect, right? And then
Hmm.
obviously through the entire journey itself, right? It didn't just start with your last 5 years of professional experience. Started with who you are, where you come from, which school you went to, what did you do in that school, what do you do in college, and why, right? And I think at those points didn't necessarily make all those decisions keeping in mind, oh, I want to go to Harvard Business School. I was doing things along the way that I felt like I wanted to do, and I think that sense of genuineness and authenticity came about when I had to really stitch that story together. um,
Hmm.
so in terms
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
whether it was leading a sports team in school, whether it was volunteering at Xavier's, these were not things that I did keeping in mind that I have to pad a resume for an application. These were things that I just did at that point in time because I wanted to do them. Right. And
Hmm.
for whatever my motives were at that particular point, I highlighted them in the essay, and like that stitched together a story that did, I think, in hindsight, really highlight um, what I have done in a genuine sense of also who I am and where I want to take this forward. So, yeah, I think the hardest part is really identifying the uniqueness of your application. So for me, it was not, although I came from strategy, it was not really comparing myself as a consultant, really highlighting and showcasing that the data science, data analytics aspect of it. Then when I joined a startup, I was not necessarily a startup guy. I wasn't a founder. I wasn't a chief of staff, which is another very um, popular role that tends to be a feeder um, for MBA admits. Right, I was perhaps one of the few guys who actually had P&L experience,
Hmm.
which is again another part that I really stood out from. Right, if I was in product management, chances are it would have been harder for me. Again, this is just anecdotal, right? No real way of backing it up, but I think the story that we ended up stitching together really put me in a pool that highlighted the differences of me being a data guy and then a P&L guy, which not many people necessarily have that
Right.
experience.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. What I hear right now is that though you started off like most of the people, just trying to appear as Superman of some sorts, as a
Yeah.
consultant, etc. But then you kind of reflected back and you thought about your story and you said, okay, let's just be genuine. This is who I am, and a lot of the decisions you did not probably think forward looking in terms of I'm doing this just for an MBA. You actually did it because
Yeah.
you really wanted to learn something, and
Yeah.
that's how you stitched it together. And that is what I mean. The genuineness is what actually I think was something that was captured in your essay,
For sure.
and your application process.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very accurate summary of the last 5 minutes I went on rambling
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
answer.
Oh, it's pretty cool because a lot of people I speak to in general who might not be even on the podcast,
Yeah.
they all talk about how they made certain decisions because they were feeders to say a B school, or in
Yeah.
general, they will probably make them look good in some respects, maybe
Yeah.
do social work because that's
Yeah.
how the market or the B school
Yeah.
admissions counselors are like probably seen it more favorably at
Yeah.
particular point in time. But yeah, like I agree with you, man. Like I think what you want to do, like just be genuine about things. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's probably going to be very hard for you to stitch a story which is actually genuine and can resonate with the admissions folks as well. Because I'm sure they're also
Yeah.
very smart folks. They've been doing this for years
Yeah.
to vet
I think
candidates.
that
So
it's
I
very
get
easy for
it.
them to highlight. I think it's very easy for them to address and highlight any of these I wouldn't say necessarily red flags, but things that don't necessarily seem the most genuine. Whether whether it comes out in the essay or comes out in the interview, I think yeah, they're very good at picking up these things.
I'm sure, man. I'm sure. What like so now I want to understand a little bit about your plans, your short term and your long term goals. So
Sure.
how are you thinking? I'm sure these are dynamic goals, and they change with experiences and time. When you go to B school, maybe you just come out as a very different person. But at the
Yeah.
moment, how have you captured your long term and short term goals in your application process? How are you thinking about them when you were applying to B schools? How have you projected those
Well,
goals?
I think my long term goal is, and like you said, right? I mean, most people who do state their goals before MBA don't necessarily go ahead and pursue it. And I think that's a very common joke that
Yeah.
people have told me about also.
Yeah.
But to me, at this point, at least my long-term goal doesn't seem to be too unwavering. I know I want to come back to India for sure and lead a business in some form or the other, whether it's through a
Yeah.
place I already worked at before, whether through it's a family business or something of my own, right? I think I know that this is the country that I ultimately do want to be in and want to build and lead a business in. Um, Now, I think working backwards from that, right, it came down more to about speaking to people who are doing what um, I genuinely find interesting or what I want to do in the future, and essentially working backwards from there again. So, having conversations with people who have led businesses in the past within the country, understanding from them, how did their career work out, what were their key inflection points that they went through, decisions that they had to make. Everything else sort of becomes like a sacrifice, right? I mean, uh, it's like, do I want to spend 3 years there, then go through the entire lottery purchase, like the lottery of an H1B, right? To have a certain standard of living versus coming here having different standard of living, but
Yeah.
perhaps having more members of the community that you had grown up in, people who had sort of put their hand on your shoulders and then give back essentially to the next set of people who will come forward, right? So it's, I guess, just more about what decision you choose. And I know for me, the long term goal, like I said, is coming back here and leading a business here. Shorter term, it's more about identifying what will give me the biggest um, advantage to come back and actually achieve that long term goal. So yeah, I think while that is not necessarily set in stone at this point, most of my conversations and discussions are about those kind of things. Right? I know for a fact that I want to learn more about finance. I want to learn more about strategy, and definitely different business problems in different industries. Right. So you could say consulting is most likely the next step that I would take here, but it could end up being something in a VC, which is also somewhat similar in terms of opening up and understanding different business models and things like that. So I think right now using this time to really figure out what that next the short term should be to that act as a stepping stone towards a long term goal.
Thank you so much for giving such a genuine answer in terms of how you're thinking about things. Because you get a bunch of advice from people, you should do this,
Yeah.
do that, but you're actually like taking your time. You know what you want out of your next few steps, but like you're open to like exploring
Yeah.
the roles that might come with consulting, private equity, VC,
Yeah.
etc. But again, Anay, this is one of the most genuine conversations I've had till now, and thank you so much, for taking your time doing this with me on the podcast. It was really fun having you, man. And I'm sure you're gonna do wonders, great things in the coming few in the coming time. So best of luck, yeah, for your journey ahead. Cheers,
Thank
man.
you. Thanks for having me. And I mean, if there's any point in the future, if you want to do this again, maybe when I also have a pathway that's a little more set in stone, can actually go back and reflect on some of the answers that we had here. I think from one of the other discussions that we had, also I realized that like I told you this before, also, right? I think I've always wanted to do a podcast in terms of really understand um, folks who have, you could say, had successful careers,
Yeah.
right? And really understand what their decisions were, what were like the hardest things that they had to choose between, what sacrifices they made, right? And I think this opportunity that I've had getting into HBS has sort of opened up that for me. So I am extremely thankful for you to first having me here, because I think now I'm more motivated to do that and actually share those stories also with people. And yeah, like I said, in case there's anything I can ever do again in the future, please let me know. And happy to address any other questions that you may have, or people who end up watching this actually may have about anything in the application process whatsoever. Yeah, happy to help anybody who actually shoots a message and wants to get in touch.